The court is now back in session. Before we proceed to the prosecution, we would like to ask how much time the prosecution would need to put questions to this witness.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are aiming to complete our examination by lunchtime, perhaps give or take 10-15 minutes, just depending on the witness's ability to recall. But by about lunchtime, we should be done and then handing over to civil parties.
The President. Thank you. We would like to hand over now to the prosecution. You may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. And good morning again, Mr. Kibnew. Just before the break, you told us that you were asked to work at a Southwest Zone office in Phnom Penh. First, could you tell us who instructed you to go and work in this office?
Response. The Mok was the one who ordered this.
And do you recall when that was? I think at this point we're discussing 1976. Was it in 1976? And was it early or mid or late 1976, if you recall?
Response. I don't recall this clearly. It was about early or late of the year, but it will take me quite some time to recollect this, and I can't really think about it now due to time constraint.
Thank you, that's fine. Can we just confirm that it was 1976?
Response. I think maybe in late 1976.
Thank you. Could you tell the court what the responsibilities of that office were? What did that office do?
Response. The office was meant to transport materials from Phnom Penh to people outside of the location, and in particular the materials were transported from the state warehouse.
What type of materials were being transported from the state warehouse?
Response. The materials include dishes, household chores, and cement, steel, things that people needed. And this also include some candles, anything people could Jews would be transported from the warehouse.
Just for the record, could you tell the court where the state warehouse was located?
No,
Response. It was located in Phnom Penh, but I don't remember in which particular location it was located. People would go there with trucks, with a ladder, then the materials would be allowed to be loaded on the trucks and transported.
And just before we continue with these operations, can we just also ask you how long you stayed at this office in Phnom Penh?
Response. I worked until 1979, until the war started and I left.
What was your position at this Southwest Zone office? Did you have a position?
Response. My position was to manage people at the transport section. I oversaw the drivers, a few drivers. That's all. I had no further authority than this.
And you said to us that people would go to the state warehouse with a letter to collect the goods for transport to the zones. Who were those letters issued by?
Answer. The letter was issued by the Upper Onka. It was from the above economic section.
And who was in that above economic section?
Answer. Are you referring to the person who was the chief or who actually organized the above economic section or the state economy? At that time, in regards to the state economy, it was managed or supervised by Mr. Von Wett.
And was it Mr. Von Wett that would personally sign and issue these letters authorizing goods to be transported?
Answer. I did not know him at that time. I think there was another unit called K22. But I did not really examine the letter carefully, but I remember it could come from K22 office.
And were there any other senior people or that you knew of at that time that were working with Vaughan Vet or at the higher level in the state economy?
Answer. In reference to the state warehouse, it was supervised by Ruan, but he passed away. And there was another person by the name of Tain, but I did not know when we split. And as for the agriculture, it was supervised by Jane On. Rather, it was the industry. It was by Jane On, but I cannot recall every name.
And just before we move on to some of these names, you indicated that goods were sent from the state warehouse to the region. Were any goods being transported from the regions back to Phnom Penh?
Answer, yes, there was.
Could you tell us what types of goods?
Actually, the goods that were transported, including cotton, rice, that is, all those products are produced by the local people.
Was your unit, your transportation unit, responsible for transporting this produce from the southwest to Phnom Penh?
Answer. I stated that rice and cotton were transported to Phnom Penh through the state warehouse. And also coconut were transported for making soap.
Just to clarify my question, was that material being transported by your unit to Phnom Penh?
Answered, yes, they were transported to Phnom Penh.
Do you recall how often you transported the goods from the southwest to Phnom Penh?
Answer. It is difficult to tell you how frequent the transportation was done. But actually it was rather frequent. I just cannot tell you the exact frequency of the transportation.
would it be, to the best of your recollection, and please do tell us if you don't recall this level of detail, but would it be weekly, would it be monthly, would it be a number of times a year, approximately, how often?
Answer. It varied, depend on the availability of the product. For example, when the cotton was to the exact amount to be transported, then it will be transported to the industrial section. Although I oversaw it, but I did not see it by myself. It was transported by the group to the industry. As for other commodities, the same thing was done. It was not transported to the zone first, but it was transported directly to the relevant section.
Focusing on food items just for a brief moment, such as rice and coconuts, do you recall a normal transport of these items? How many trucks would be involved? Are we talking about large quantities or small quantities?
Answer. The vehicles were from the zone. So usually when the trucks carrying goods from Phnom Penh to the zone, and upon their return back to Phnom Penh, they would transport those products from the zone to Phnom Penh. But I cannot tell you exactly the quantity of the products to be transported. It was the organization or management by the state warehouse.
And on the matter of organization, do you know who in the southwest zone was responsible to organize for the produce to be loaded and made available for transport back to Phnom Penh?
Answer. It depends on the locality of the provinces or the zones. So upon the availability, those produce would be loaded into the trucks and returned to Phnom Penh. Usually, for the large transportation, it would be dealt with by the state warehouse. And as for the zone, usually we would only load our produce when the trucks were empty upon the unloading of the goods from Phnom Penh.
Very well. Now, you mentioned earlier a person called Cheng An, who you said was in charge of the Ministry of Industry. Did you see him in this period?
Answer. I met him when he came to inquire about the bricks. And actually, I went to contact Jane On when I made inquiries about the bricks. And sometimes when I went there, I saw Von Wade. He was there too.
Did you ever meet an individual called Van Rith?
Answer, I could not recall the surname, but I met a person by the name of Red.
Do you know what position he held?
Answer, he was at the foreign trade section, but I am not that 100% sure.
And was that foreign trade section a different office from the office where you saw Cheng An?
Answer, I did not know the detail beyond that.
Very well. You stayed in Phnom Penh until, I think you said, January 1979. Did Cheng An also stay in Phnom Penh in his position until January 79?
Answer, I cannot recall it clearly.
Do you know what happened to him in 79 or after 79? Did you ever see him?
Answer, I do not know beyond what I stated.
Just before we move on from this individual, I'll note for the record, Your Honour's introductory submission, document 5.12, contains a confession in the name of An. Mr. Kivneo, if we could discuss what happened with some of these other people. Do you know what happened to Vaughan Vet in this period?
Answer, I only heard from other people that he had issues and then he disappeared from the ministry. However, the information was not official.
Who was it that you heard that from?
Answer, of course, it's not possible to verify who was the source of the information because it was relayed from one person to the next.
So was that one of your colleagues in Phnom Penh that told you that Vaughan Vet had disappeared?
Answer, that's what I heard, but I cannot recall the name of the person from whom I heard of the news because many people talked about that.
vì chắc riêng của mặt mình nhé.
So it is not possible to identify or pinpoint who was the person who actually the starter of telling people about that information.
Are you able to tell us anything more about what issues it was said that Vaughan Vet had? You said people said he had issues and disappeared.
Answer. Officially, there was no much news. However, unofficially, we heard a lot of things.
And what were things that you heard? Briefly, please.
Answer. I only heard that he had the issues.
And do you recall when it was that he disappeared?
Answer. I could not recall that.
Và phải dắt và khuôn ai nhé.
I was only mindful of my own self, and when I heard about that, I was rather concerned as well. So I kept quiet and I kept it to myself.
Tục đặt luôn.
So I had to just to prepare myself to work and to survive.
Apart from Vaughan Vet, did you know of anyone else that disappeared in that period?
Answer. Previously, Hunam and Huyun had disappeared, but that was earlier.
Did you know why they disappeared? Was there any discussion of the reasons for their disappearance?
Answer. I was completely in the dark regarding the disappearance of these two individuals. Because I did not have any relation or contact with them at all. As for Vaughan Vet, I had some contact with him to a degree, and later on I heard of his disappearance.
And what about ordinary cadre, people such as yourself, working in Phnom Penh? Did you ever notice anyone disappearing?
Answer. Some people who were not close to me had disappeared, and I heard about the disappearance of other people here and there. Yes, so there was a disappearance during the time.
Do you know anything about why people were disappearing?
Answer. The disappearance was due to being accused of being traitors.
And why would people be accused of being traitors? What was it that these people did that would lead to them being accused of being traitors?
Answer. I am not sure regarding this matter. As I stated from the outset, I only knew some parts at the end, not at the beginning. So I only knew, for example, about the branch, but not the root of the tree, because I'm not the one who was fully in charge at the time. Even I oversaw the transportation. It was just a minor role in the process.
When you were in Phnom Penh, did you attend any meetings at which instructions were given about work, about discipline, or other aspects of your work?
Answer. Meetings held at the zone, not in Phnom Penh. And instructions were given by Samnang at the zone.
How often did you attend these sessions with Samnang?
Answer. I cannot recall exactly, and the meetings did not take place frequently.
At these meetings, were issues of traitors ever discussed? Were you ever told about traitors in those meetings?
Answer. Lessons were taught. They talk about the lines of the revolution, the lines for the people, for instance. They never touch upon a name of any individual in the document. They focused on the lines and the regulations of the revolution.
Very briefly, because we have limited time, what were the most important lines that you were taught about?
Answer. The lines of the revolution mainly address the issues dealing with the peasants. It stated that in Cambodia, 85% of people were peasants. So decisions are being made to conform with the majority of the population. That meant to conform with the 85% of peasants in Cambodia.
Did that mean that people who were not peasants would be required to conform to peasants?
Answer. People needed to engage in training, even patients. Patients needed to study the lines for the patients as well. And for those who were not patients, they needed to make themselves to work like patients. As for me, I had been a monk, so I had to conform myself to be a patient, to carry the work of a patient. Although when I was young, I used to work like a patient in the rice field.
Could you recall for the court what position Sam Nang held? Sam Nang who led these sessions.
Answer. Could you please confirm which Sam Nang are you referring to?
The Sam Nang who you said gave instruction at the education meetings in the zone.
Answer. At the zone, I have not mentioned any other people's name except the name of a Tamok. Or maybe I made a mistake.
It may be an interpretation error. Could you tell us who chaired these education sessions? Who led the education sessions?
Answer. The meetings were chaired by a person named But. He was Tamok's deputy and he already passed away. Usually he was the one who chairs the meeting.
Is this a person whose full name is Sam Bit?
Response. Yes, it is correct.
Thank you. Did Tamok ever take part in these education sessions?
Response. When I attended meetings, I never met him in the meeting, but I met him in person to talk to him directly. I never met him in study sessions or meetings.
Did Tamok come to Phnom Penh during that period when you were working in the city?
Response. When the state or the upper echelon needed him, he had to drop by to a meeting briefly, and he would leave. For example, if he had to attend a full day meeting, he had to remain there the full day, or if the meeting lasts for 2 days, he would be there and then left. Sometimes he had to remain in Phnom Penh only for an hour or so.
You said he would come when the upper echelon needed him. Did you know who was in that upper echelon?
Response. I think people told us, or we heard from others, that the upper echelon would be Pol Pot, the top leader, the person who was known to everyone, and that's what I also know. I know like the other, or everybody else does. However, I have no idea what happened with regard to the management of that echelon.
Did Tamok tell you who he met with when he would come to Phnom Penh?
Response. Normally, at that time, people did not prefer to refer to individuals by names. They referred to them by Angka. Because officially, when they refer to an individual, they would just refer to Angka. For example, Angka would need to convene a meeting and people had to be attending it. So Angka would be the only word to refer to.
Now, I just wish to return for a few moments to people you met during your visits to various sites in Phnom Penh. In that period, while working in Phnom Penh, did you ever meet or see Mr. Khieu Samphan?
Response. I saw him, I met him.
Do you recall how many times you saw him?
Response. I met him on 2 occasions.
And do you know what position Mr. Khieu Samphan held at that time?
Response. Publicly and universally, he was known to be the head of the state presidium, and I heard it from radio broadcasts. Everyone heard this. He was the head of the state presidium.
Apart from having that public role, did you know whether he held any other positions?
Response. I know unofficially his role other than that, but officially I don't know other than that.
Can you tell us what you know unofficially?
The President, witness, please hold on. Counsel for Mr. Yangsari, you may now proceed. Counsel Ang Udam. Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors, my learned colleagues, and everyone in the courtroom. I think Mr. Co-Prosecutor is calling for a speculation from the witness. The President. Counsel's objection is sustained. Witness is now instructed not to respond to that question.
When you met Khieu Samphan on these 2 occasions, what was the purpose that for you meeting him?
Response. At the beginning, when I first met him, I was accompanying someone to see him at the ministry. I was outside of the office. I took people from Chomka Kausu, or the rubber plantation, to meet him. When I was there, I was outside of the ministry when the other met him. And later on, when Mr. Kilsampon heard about me, he heard about my name. He never saw my face, so he would like to grant me an audience. So I met him. And at that time, he also asked me about some work. He asked about people at about Battambang, and I perhaps do not recall the detail, but he asked about the request from Battambang that there was a need for fabric or cloth for the people there, and he said that we had only the white plain cloth, and I also said that white plain cloth would also be needed, and we discussed about the white cloth during the old time, that they could be dyed in the mud to have the color needed to be used. And that's part of the conversation I had with him, although I cannot recollect the details. In particular, the topic for the discussion was about the materials people needed. And I was also talking about the saw mill, and we discussed about the conventional tools used by people, and we should not resort to the tools manufactured by factory. We should resort to our own tradition of producing tools first. This part of the matter we discussed when I met him. And on another occasion, it was raining cat and dark, and the national road number 1 was flooded and ruined by the flood, the road to Swai Rieng. People from Kandal approached me to contact the upper echelon to assist to handle the situation at that location so that the road could be saved. And I also contacted him, and he asked me the question how I should handle this. And the water sluice was stuck, and it could not be removed. Because it could be removed and the water could be released, and we had to bring in a crane to help fix the situation. This is the matter I discussed with him, although I can't remember the details, but these are the main points I met and discussed with him on the second occasion.
Thank you for being so comprehensive in your answers. It helps us get through the material very quickly. You said you accompanied someone on the first occasion, people from the rubber plantation, to meet Mr. Kilsampon at a ministry. Which ministry was that?
Response. It was at the Foreign Commerce section. Mr. Won Wait was absent. Normally, Mr. Won Wait would be in charge, but when in his absence, Mr. Kilsampon was in place. I don't know whether it was the case. However, I saw him there.
Did you know whether Khieu Samphan often worked at that office? And if you don't know, please tell us.
Response: I don't know much about this. I just saw him on that occasion. Before that, I had no idea. And I still don't know what he did after that. I only know what I saw and met him at that time.
When people from Kandal approached you about the flooding and asked you to contact the upper echelon, how did you know that you needed to contact Mr. Khieu Samphan?
Response: my nephew by marriage worked closely with Khieu Samphan. So through him, I could communicate the message. He was called Same. So it was more like a kind of off-the-record communication.
Do you know whether Mr. Khieu Samphan had any alias in that time?
Response: I didn't know what his alias was at that time. But later on, in 1980s or 1990s, that I learned that he had another name, but I didn't know about this back then.
Do you recall what that name was?
Response: Tamok called him Comrade Ham.
And do you know whether during that period, 1975 to 1979, Tamok met with Mr. Khieu Samphan?
Response: I believe that they could have met because the upper echelon could have met one another. However, I don't know who else they could have met. It's surely my speculation, but I can't go further on this.
Thank you. You said how on one occasion when you met with Mr. Khieu Samphan, you discussed using conventional tools and not using factory tools. What did Mr. Khieu Samphan say to you in that meeting?
Response: he was pleased, and we reached a consensus that it would be the way, and the materials were then transported to Ong Ta Saum in the first place. The saw and other tools were transported to the location to deal with this, and he agreed.
Just before I leave that issue, what sort of factory tools were not supposed to be used as far as you recall those discussions?
Response. There was a factory in the southwest, deep in the jungle, but the factory was not sufficient to produce tools for the use needed for people's need. And I suggested that as long as we had some conventional tools used by our people before already, we need to make the most of it. We need to take the advantage of the available tools and not resorting to the factory tools, which is not sufficient. I also need to add further that I made some requests to make use of the used bottles, fish sauce bottles, to reuse. And the people who produced fish sauce at Kampong Ampel location could not find any container to put the fish sauce, so I suggested that we use the used bottles.
And from what you have described so far, do I understand correctly that Mr. Kyusampong would authorize certain materials to be used? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Response. I already indicated that he agreed that the materials could be used, so he gave the green light, and he was pleased that these materials could be used for the need of the people. That's I already indicated once and again.
Thank you for clarifying that point. While you stayed at the Southwest Zone office in Phnom Penh, did other people from the Southwest Zone, apart from Tamok, come to Phnom Penh for meetings or otherwise?
Response. People from the sector, the province level people and the division, and perhaps also people at the district level as well, but I may be mistaken with regard to the district level people, but other people from the sector and province level had to meet with Pol Pot to receive direct orders and instructions. But that's what I have heard of. I heard that they were there to meet the upper echelon to receive some instructions, and they would drop by my home. And if they were escorted by their bodyguards, they would drop by my location before they would be taken further by other groups. And after they left the meetings, then they would stop by again and would continue their journey from there.
Are you able to recall the names of any of these people that used to come for meetings?
Response. people from the southwest zone, the chiefs of Takeo province, Mr. Saum, and Chief of Kandal province, Mr. Chia and Prak, but they all passed away. From Kampong Chnang, people, the person by the name of Yum, he also died. And from Kampong Spur there was also the chief, but I cannot recollect his name. But I still recall, rather, I don't remember people from the sector committee of Kampong Spur. These are the individuals that I mentioned.
Did an individual by the name of Chu Chet, alias C, ever come to Phnom Penh?
Response: Chu Chet alias C was in the southwest zone, but later on he had been transferred to the west zone. However, the west zone office was not far from the location where I worked, and Chu Chet had also been ordained as the Buddhist monk, and we had known one another unofficially. We talked, chit-chatted in our capacity as Buddhist monks, or people who used to become Buddhist monks.
Did you know Chu Chet's wife? Did you know the name of the woman he was married to?
Response: I remembered this name before, but I cannot recollect it now. Indeed, I knew this person, but I just can't recollect the right name for now.
If I tell you the name, you tell me if that's the name that you recalled, or if not, please say so. Was her name Im Nen alias Lee?
Response: that's correct.
And do you recall at all what position she held, if any, during that period?
Response: I don't know about this because we were in separate zones.
You knew Chu Chet, and you said you talked to him from time to time. Do you know what happened to him?
Response: I think later on we heard that he disappeared, but I can't say or can confirm for the purpose of a court record. I just heard from one another concerning this.
And did you hear anything about what happened to his wife?
Response: no, I don't know about this. I knew more than anybody could have known him is that Mr. Chuchet had been very sick because he had undergone some operation to have his inner organ removed.
Thank you. Your Honours, I'll just indicate for the file relevant document numbers as I did earlier. Chuchet's confession is document IS 5.15, and also of relevance is document E3/1098, which relates to the arrest of his wife, E3/1098, and lastly, both are listed in the S21 revised prisoner list, document D288/6.68.1. Chuchet is listed as number 1509. Im Nen alias Lee, his wife, is listed as number 2896. Mr. Kivnil, when these people came to Phnom Penh to attend meetings, you said they would be escorted by bodyguards. Do you know where those meetings were held?
Response. Allow me to elaborate on this. In Phnom Penh during the 3-year period, people could not move everywhere freely. I did not go to walk to other locations, and we heard that they met with the upper echelon, but we never know where these locations were. Only people who used to be in contact or attending such meetings would know where the locations would be, and a person of lower level like me was not able to know that.
Very well. And just one last question on that issue. Did you know, and tell us if you didn't, what the purpose of these people coming to meet the upper echelon was? Do you know what the purpose of those meetings was?
Response. I think my response would be based on my speculation, because I was not the head of the section. I think the meeting was nothing more than how to manage the state and affairs. I could say that because I have read some documents. The documents confirmed my position, confirmed the People's Line and the Popular Mass Line, which was part of the discussion. So I based my argument or testimony on the documents I have read. So I can conclude that the meetings were more about the state affairs, how to defend the country, so on and so forth.
Thank you, Mr. Kivnil. Mr. President, we need approximately another 10 to 15 minutes. With your leave, we will continue after the break if this is an appropriate time to stop.
The President, thank you, Mr. Kivnil. Since it is now lunch break, the chamber will adjourn for lunch. The next session will be resumed by 1:30. Court officer is now instructed to assist witness during the lunch break and have him return to the courtroom by 1:30. Counsel for Mr. Nuon Chea, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. My client would like to follow the rest of the hearing in the holding cell. I have the necessary waivers here to hand over.
The President, the Chamber has noted the request by counsel for Nuon Chea, in which Mr. Nuon Chea has requested that he be excused from this courtroom and allowed to observe the proceedings from his holding cell. Defense counsel has made it clear that he would submit the waiver to the Chamber concerning this. The Chamber therefore grants such request. Mr. Nuon Chea will be allowed to observe the proceedings from his holding cell for the remainder of the day, and he has waived his right to be present in the courtroom. The Chamber asks that counsel for Nuon Chea submit the waiver signed or given thumbprint by Mr. Nuon Chea to the trial chamber as soon as possible. The AV Board of Officers are now instructed to ensure that the AV equipments are well linked to the holding cell so that Mr. Nuon Chea can observe the proceedings from there for the remainder of the day. Security personnel are now instructed to bring Mr. Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan to the holding cells and have Mr. Khieu Samphan return to the courtroom in the afternoon when the next session resumes. The court is adjourned.
សូមគោរពឈរ